1 in 3 is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse, such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own.
Hi, warriors. Welcome to 1 in 3. I'm your host, Ingrid. How often do we hear the question, why don't they just leave, when talking about victims of domestic violence? Today's conversation may change that question entirely. I'm joined by Dr. Danielle, someone I feel is one of the most qualified voices to speak on legal abuse. Through her personal story and expertise, we'll explore a deeper, more important question: what happens when they do leave? Here's Danielle. Hi, Danielle. Thank you so much for joining me today, and welcome to 1 in 3. I'm very, very happy to have you here.
Well, thank you, Ingrid. I'm happy to be here.
We just were mentioning that there is so much that we could talk about, but before we get into any of that conversation, could you share some of a background with the listeners just so they can get to know you a little bit?
Well, I was born and raised in Switzerland. My accent comes from the French-speaking part of Switzerland and learning English in India. So it got mixed up. And I like to start with that because people don't listen to me until they can place that accent. Where is she
That's very
from?
interesting. Yeah.
So I was traveling, just learning English. And, in India, when I came to this country, I had a very strong Indian accent. And now it's kind of mixed up depending how tired or focused I am. So that. And then I started, I've always been interested in how the brain works. I wanted to be a brain surgeon. My parents couldn't afford a study, so I went into psychology. And also I was diagnosed with skin cancer when I was 15 and I had surgery every 6 months. Then the Institute of Psychology told me, we're also teaching nutrition. Why don't you look into that? So I did that, bought my first juicer when I was 18 years old, and I stopped going to the surgeon. What I needed was a deep cleanse. And I've kept a foot both in psychology and in nutrition ever since. I got a doctorate as a naturopath. When was that? In 94, I believe. And then my PhD in natural health in 96. And my study was still in the brain, so I did it on the healing power of the mind. And I got married in 80, had my first daughter in 82. I home birthed and homeschooled 7 children. But I didn't realize that I was living in an abusive relationship. My ex-husband was always telling me, well, you're European, you don't understand the American way. And we lived very isolated, so I didn't have anybody around to really compare. And when I was doing my ND or my PhD, I ended up looking into the power of the mind, what I could study on that. And I found a doctor in Mill Valley in California. And I listened to him say, that guy is different. And then I told my ex, I have so much digestive problems. I want to go see that doctor. And he agreed on that. And that doctor was amazing. And then I joined their group and I studied interactive guided imagery. And going back, I went to a client of mine says, these people are like Swiss people. And she said, welcome to America. You've been in hell until now. So, yeah, eventually I filed for divorce and it got even worse. I remember visiting a colleague there in Mill Valley from the group, and we were talking about my practice and my studies, and we were enjoying it. And then she says, well, how is it going with your divorce? And she said, it's like you just went like that. And she took an appointment with a therapist. And okay, we talked, and I didn't think much of it, but she gave me some books to read. And it was amazing. It was like that therapist was right in my living room, knowing exactly what was happening, because a lot of it was verbal abuse. And to me, I never considered that abuse.
Yeah, because it's hard to understand it, right? Verbal abuse, and then you can't prove it necessarily
Yeah, and
either.
you cannot prove it. And the other thing, my ex came from a very abusive family. He saw his mom in a hospital many times. I was told when he was 12 years old, they found him in a tree with a gun. He was going to kill his stepfather. So he came from a very bad background. I was lucky. I had wonderful parents. They were married for 65 years until my mom passed away. I never heard them argue on anything. They talked, they had different points of view, but there was no violence and they were very supportive parents. So I thought when I met him and I learned about his background, I thought, well, maybe I can help him. And basically, I married him because I felt sorry for him. And 20 years later, I was the one that had a lot of health issues. And I didn't know why. Now, his mom was beaten so people could see it. He would rape me and do verbal abuse. And I was isolated, living in the forest alone with my kids and dogs, and I didn't know any better.
Did he verbally abuse the children too?
Yeah, he came home from work around 4 o'clock, and we were playing with the kids and doing the homework. He came home, and everybody disappeared in their bedroom. So they were afraid of him. And yeah, I was terrified of him.
Yeah. And how old were they when you filed for divorce?
My youngest was 5, which means my oldest was 17.
Okay. And I mean, abusers have a great way of making sure they look fantastic to everyone else in the
Yes.
world. Did the children, I mean, they would hide when he would come home, but when
hmm
you filed for divorce, did they understand? Did they take sides? Did they try to stay neutral?
Well, I never talked badly about their father. They saw what was happening. And once they turned 18, they left and never talked to the father again for years. And now my two youngest are kind of still talking with them, trying to have a father. But the others know they know. And during the divorce, I learned that he had been or still was a pedophile. He had raped his younger sister for 8 years, had molested another one.
Was he ever prosecuted for that?
No, I mean there were. I tried to go back, but for some reason, nothing was ever done. But I
Oh
know
my
his
gosh.
sister had so much problem. I think she's been married 4 or 5 times, divorced into drugs. And when
Mm.
we went to visit, very rarely did we visit the family, his family. And she would hide. She would not come, talk with us. And then when we were at some point in the divorce, the judge gave custody of the girls to me and custody of my son to the father.
Okay, so how did that happen? Because that's what I don't understand. That's the part
Yeah,
that always
don't
these
try
parts
to
of the story make me
understand
angry. No,
things in the divorce.
I get so frustrated with this.
Yes, it is. And then the father was asking custody of the youngest one, and that sister manifested. I hadn't seen her for like 18, 20 years. And she wrote a letter to the judge saying, don't give him custody of the youngest one because he raped me. And she detailed what he did to her. And 6 weeks later, he had full custody of all my kids. And I didn't get to see them for 2 years. I was supposed to have supervised visitation. He was supposed to arrange them. He never did.
How many years?
2 years.
Oh my gosh. So zero contact. Were you able to did they try
Well,
to
they were teenagers. One of them would sneak out and had a cell phone and contacted me and said, Mom, I want to die. I can't live like that. And there was nothing I could do. They run away twice. And how did that go? The first time they ran away, they went. Okay, I didn't know he had raped his sister. I received the letter in the morning. She gave me a copy of what she sent to the judge, and I read that the night before, and we were supposed to go to court the following morning. My daughter was, no, I was driving and my heart started to go into fibrillation. So I contacted a doctor, a medical doctor friend of mine, said, you immediately go to the hospital. So my daughter, dropped me at the hospital, told the court I couldn't make it. She saw me, with all kind of tubes and stuff. And she said, Mom, I just bought a car with a big trunk. I'm going to take my siblings, run away to protect them. And she did. She took the siblings and ran away somewhere in Colorado. We were living in California. And to this day, I don't know where they went because she knew she would be tracked. So she would stop at the payphone, call somebody who would call somebody else who would call me saying they okay. And then all kind of things happen with the court. The one of the deputy attorney, DA, called me and says, we need the children. I promise we'll protect the children. They will not go back to the father. And so they made arrangement with the father's younger sister, who's a millionaire in Florida, to contact them so they could go there for safety. And my oldest daughter went, checked them out, and as soon as she left, the father came, got full custody, and got them back to California with him.
So was this the younger sister of his that he had raped, like the one in Florida?
No, it was the youngest one he had not raped.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
okay. He has two brothers and three sisters. He raped the oldest sister, he molested the second, but he didn't do anything to the third one. And then they made up a whole story that it wasn't true, that never happened. But the way she wrote her letter makes me believe that it was true because the things he did to her, he also did to me.
Oh,
So anyway, they went back to him, and that was a huge shock. And a few weeks, months, I didn't go back to my timeline. He accused one of my daughters of having stolen a purse in Florida. And she said, no, she didn't. And he was, I don't know, was accusatory. She was terrified. She got a knife. She called the cops, said, I'm afraid of my dad. Please come help. The cops came, handcuffed her, put her in the back of a police car, drove her to a psychiatric clinic where she spent
what?
a week.
Oh my gosh. Were you notified when that happened?
No, I was notified later on by they were in contact with my oldest daughter who was in her 20s at that time. And yeah, she went there. She told me, the doctor wanted to give me medication. And I told him, I don't want any medication. It's not going to change the situation. And then he was also threatening to put the two younger ones there if they didn't obey him. So my oldest daughter, okay, let's see, daughter number 1 and 4 took a car and went to see their sibling in the psychiatric clinic. And they visited her. The father heard about it, so he put like a restraining order that nobody but him was allowed to see that daughter.
And they approved this restraining order? Did a judge signed the restraining order?
No, that was a hospital. He told the hospital, as far as I know, not to let anybody see the daughter except him. So these two daughters, 1 and 4, went to the consulate in San Francisco. We're on their way to the consulate because I'm Swiss, so my kids are Swiss too, to ask for help. But in between, I don't remember how it happened, but they heard that the father had filed a kidnapping order, that my oldest, who was in her 20s, had kidnapped a 16-year-old and that they were going to be arrested. So they didn't end up in the consulate. They went back. And so that's, that's part of the thing. And we were talking earlier about temporary restraining orders. I had about a 1-foot file with CPS that neighbors, friends, psychologists, therapists, medical doctors had said, the mother is a great mother, the father is abusive. And the court said, well, she's brainwashing everybody. I was not allowed to bring any of the files from CPS to get custody of my children.
Why?
Don't
I mean,
ask me why.
stop asking why.
That was a small town. The head of CPS was a wife of the DA who worked with my ex. Just he didn't need an attorney finally because the DA was his attorney.
This is so awful.
So that's what legal abuse is things go totally awry. And when we go to court, when we start, you expect the judge to protect your children. And then it spirals out of control, and you made to believe that you're the crazy one.
Yeah. Well, and you're just protective. And of course, like, you might feel even a little crazy because you can't understand how this is happening. And all you want to do is protect your children.
Yeah. And they send us to a therapist to make a custody, the custody recommendation. And I didn't realize that until later, but I had a client at that time that was referred to me because she had lost custody of her 3-year-old. And the father was a known alcoholic and drug abuser. And my whole thing was, what did the judge see in her that I can't see, because she seemed to be a great mother? Well, 6 months later, I had a report from the same psychologist for custody. It was a 13-page report. And as I was reading it, a client of mine who was a social worker had become a friend. So I was reading that at her place. And I was reading and said, well, if that is true, I'm not a good mother. They should not stay with me. And she shook me and said, it's not you, it's a system. Because there is literally not one paragraph that was correct. It was all made up. And how did that happen is I was supposed to get the children back on a Sunday night. And he did not bring the children back. And they were supposed to go see that psychologist the following Friday. So he kept the children the whole week to tell them what to tell the psychologist. And I called my attorney and said, I'm supposed to have custody. He's not bringing the children back. The response of my attorney was, well, you better stay home, because if he brings them back and you're not there, you're going to be in contempt of court.
But wouldn't he be in contempt of court for not bringing the children?
Apparently not.
Oh my gosh. What was the reason that a judge ruled that he got 100% custody and you didn't get to see your children for 2 years?
I don't know, because he had that letter like I did, that he had raped his sister. And, I was telling all kind of I had files upon files of things that I had written what he had done. But I was just that bad woman. Okay, where was I? So the children, after my daughter went to the psychiatric clinic, they made plans on running away again, because he was going to put them all in a psychiatric clinic, and they achieved that. And people helped them, and they got a car, and they drove to Las Vegas, where my 2 oldest and myself were living. And I knew I couldn't see the kids. So my daughter had an attorney, and they went all to see the attorney. She prepared a TRO and protective orders, and it was the day before Christmas. So because we filed everything, then she said, you can have your children for Christmas. We still hid at friends' house in different motels. So the children were with me, and the court hearing was constantly postponed, and another one, and another one. And then somewhere around April, I think was 17th, the U.S. Marshals surrounded our home and took my oldest daughter was there. They handcuffed her and put her in a police car. She was going to a very important symposium she was a stunt woman, and she was going to go to her third event that probably would have launched her career. And she was in a police car. My 15-year-old was taken out of her room at gunpoint by the U.S. Marshals. And obviously, they arrested me, and my daughter spent 4 days in jail, and I spent 6 months in maximum security.
Maximum security.
Yes, with drug dealers, with murderers.
Oh my gosh. Because your 15-year-old was there? Or what was?
No, because there was what, five of the children had run away, and they said I had kidnapped them.
Oh my God.
So they did not want me to be tried in Las Vegas because the whole thing had been a fraud. So I had to be transferred back to California to go through trial. And in order to go transfer from one state to another, you have to have the signature of both governors of California and Nevada and both attorney generals from California and Nevada. And I have that letter that says we can prove that she physically went to California to kidnap the children. I was 500 miles away. I never went there to kidnap the children. When we started the court procedure for the trial, the judge asked, how did the children go from point A to point B? And the DA said, it's irrelevant. And my public defender said nothing.
How is that irrelevant? I mean,
Yes. How
that's
is
what
it
they do
irrelevant?
when they try to prosecute somebody for murder. They show a timeline how it was impossible for this person to do all of that in this time frame. And why wouldn't did your public defender just not care?
He told me I was a vicious woman who didn't want to obey her husband.
The public defender said this?
Mm-hmm.
Your attorney?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And that if I did not sign the plea bargain, I was going to be put in prison for 7 years, no questions asked. I had 40 witnesses I could have produced. They refused. The judge did not want to listen to any of them. There was one witness that would have been allowed in a trial, was one of the U.S. Marshal that found the children in Las Vegas. And that would have sent me 7 years in prison.
So what was the plea deal?
The plea deal was 5 years probation and the time served and not seeing my children. I don't remember if they put it 2 years. The reason I was 5 years on probation is so the children would not run away again. Because the children were told, if you run away again, we're going to put your sister and your mother back in jail.
This is awful. So did your ex-husband have connections to hire people that he was able to orchestrate all this?
Well, I was told by a psychiatrist, family therapist, and a psychologist that he was a psychopath, a true psychopath. And apparently I studied, excuse me, I studied a psychopath, and they have that uncanny ability to feel what a person is kind of weak or has, biases. So he could feel what the judge wanted to hear. He could feel what the cops wanted to hear. One time he beat up my daughter. He hurt her arm, and then the cops were called. She went to the hospital, and one of the cops said, well, teenagers don't obey. Even if he had broken her arm, I would have considered just discipline.
What?
So, and then other cops sometimes came to help, and they said, we'd love to help you, but the judge is God in this county. And, if I try to protect your children, I'd lose my job. And I have a wife and 2 or 3 children. I can't do that.
So even on the rare occasion you had somebody that recognized that you needed help and you were not this horrible person they were painting you out to be, they were too fearful for their own safety
Yeah.
to do anything. How do you cope with, like, did you stop fighting or did you continue?
No, I continued fighting until all the kids were 18. So what's interesting, there was another judge. So I decided, okay, I haven't seen my kids for 2 years. Let's try this judge. And he gave me custody back, which, was kind of amazing. But he told the children they'd have to go for a weekend every other month, spend time with their father, because he wanted the children to have a father. So I lived in Las Vegas. He was still in California. So every 2 months I brought the children, stayed with friends. And the judge had said after, a year, if you don't want to go, you won't have to go. Well, the year passed, we went back, and the judge said, yeah, that didn't work. Now, let's try to get you there every month. And I want the mother in court also every month so we can see how the situation goes. Now, my son is a dwarf, so it's easy when you see a dwarf to think that he's not mentally quite there. Well, my son was very sharp, but the father put him in a special ed, saying he can't do anything. And okay, so he was in special ed in 6th grade. I got custody for a year, and he had to take the public school end of year event in Las Vegas. He didn't need special ed anymore. He went from 6th grade to 8th grade in 1 year. We went back to court, and I was, so happy to show that to the judge. Would you guess what he said?
I don't want to know. I mean, I do, but
The state of Nevada must have cheated on the test. Therefore, we're going to put the son back with the father so he gets a proper education.
what? So now the
So
whole state is colluding against
it just,
this.
yeah.
What?
And then my son went to school like half a day a week. The rest of the time he was alone in a house watching movies. And I went to a parent teacher conference on the phone, and the kid they were talking about was not my kid. He can't read, he can't concentrate, he can't do this, he can't do that. And he was brilliant.
This is so sad.
So, yeah, that's what legal abuse is when the whole world goes upside down, and we are not prepared for that. And anybody you talk to, they will say, well, you should just get along for the sake of the children. But when you have an abuser, especially a psychopath, sociopath, or somebody who has connections, it doesn't work.
There is no co-parenting with a psychopath
No,
or
you
a
can't.
sociopath or really any abuser, because no abuser, despite a diagnosed, well, they're probably not diagnosed because they're not going to go get diagnosed, personality disorder, none of them want to take accountability for what they've done. And they're going to blame someone else or something else for their actions. And they're going to do everything they can to convince everyone around them that they've done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Or whatever actions they've taken are justified by what they are trying to say that their victim has been doing.
He never took care of the children.
Of course
That was not his thing, except when they were babies. He would shower them, change diapers. And that was not a red flag for me because I didn't know he was a pedophile. So
Right.
later on, yeah, I learned. So yeah, that's, when you were in it, well, you learn to survive. I was fortunate. I already had all kind of tools at my disposal to lower the stress. I knew how to eat to lower stress. I knew different techniques to lower stress. But still, when you go through insanity, it's survival. That's one of my doctor told me. It's not time for you to build a practice. You need to survive what's going on. And one after the other of my friend psychologists or therapists asked me not to tell them what was happening because they couldn't deal with it. Until I found Dr. Huffer, Karen Huffer, She contacted me after I was out of jail. I don't remember how we got in contact, but she wanted to know, and her and I started a support group for people suffering from legal abuse, not just in family court. That happens in elderly court. That happened with HOA. We had people who had been wrongfully terminated, and we would meet week after week and just use some of the techniques to help us survive one more week. And then I also met Linda Barnard. She passed away not that long ago, who was a therapist for legal abuse. So she understood, and I took her classes, to do custody evaluation. And she said she's one of the very few who actually do proper custody evaluation. Most of the evaluator have been trained by the Fathers' Rights Movement. So the
Oh, right.
custody, yeah. So the custody is not going to be right. And I remember, like, it was 2000, we were picketing in, not for my case, but for somebody else's case. And the judge is still there. And one of the custody evaluator, his report was he's abusing the children. He takes away everything they like. He humiliates them in front of people. He doesn't feed them properly. But the mother is a strong alienating force, so I recommend the children be put with the father. Does that make sense?
No, so he recognizes all of the abuse, but because you're trying to protect your children, they should go to the abuser.
Something like that.
I mean, that's it's pretty much it. The whole fathers' rights movement. I recognize that healthy fathers should, for sure, have a place in children's lives. Healthy mothers should
Absolutely.
have a place in children's lives. And I recognize that both genders, there can be abusers for both gender or all genders, I suppose I should say. But and I also know that there's studies that show that children do better when they're exposed to both parents. But again, that's healthy parents. And the studies show that children who are exposed to abuse or toxic family environments actually do much worse long term.
Yep.
They live shorter lifespans. They have higher incidence of substance abuse, of suicide. It's health, just
Or
general
being
health.
murdered.
Yes, being murdered. That is just so asinine. I know you had sent me Dr. Bandy Lee's information
Yeah.
because she and I started watching the program where she had
Yeah.
this conference. One thing I just remembered. So I screenshotted this at the very beginning. Mothers are 5.5 times more likely to die in 10 years if they lose custody in family court than if they never entered family court. Common causes are murder, heart attack, cancer, substance use, and suicide. And that was from a study, I think 2024. And then this, since 2008, nearly 1,000 children have been murdered by a divorcing or separating parent during a custody dispute.
Yeah. And it's getting worse.
It is getting worse. And everybody knows it, especially the judges. The judges are seeing this stuff.
Yeah, it just, my brothers in Switzerland said that would never happen in Switzerland. And yet, when I went back there in a newspaper I was reading, there was a case like that. And in France and in Spain. So it's spreading. The bad stuff is spreading, unfortunately.
It is. How many years did you spend fighting?
Well, really 16 years.
16.
And then last year, I've been living at people's home. I lost so much money. I was a professor at an institute. By now I would have been a millionaire, but I couldn't, I was teaching, and then we had the cop intervene and said I had kidnapped children and whatever. So I gave up about everything. And was what, 2 years ago, I think, my daughter said, you're entitled to part of his retirement. He cannot get it. You should ask for it. And I said, well, I knew that 9 years ago, but the new judge, was his ex-attorney. So you think he's going to sign the paper? Because the judge had to sign the paper.
Oh
So I
my
said, well, it's a
gosh.
different judge, so, try it. So she did about everything to help out. And we went in front of the judge, and then he said, okay, well, we should try to find the father. I'm saying, well, we don't know where he is. And then we went, 2 months and 2 months, and he lasted a year. And the last hearing, he was so proud. Said, my daughter, I found your father. Aren't you happy? And she said, nothing. She was really shocked to see him. And he was still manipulating. Your Honor, I'm so sorry. I have a hard time speaking. I just came out of the hospital. And talk about the paper. He had to sign the paper. Say, I tried to have her sign those papers 3 times. She refused to sign the papers.
So he's still just blatantly lying.
He was still blatantly lying, and poor me, I'm the victim here. But anyway, so everything got signed, and I got a little bit of money that allowed me to have an apartment finally after 20 years that I had been living at at friends, at my children's place, or being just in my car.
And it's so hard. Like, I don't want people to feel hopeless, but it is difficult. Like, you have to also be armed with the knowledge of these kind of situations to know you don't want to go in with you want to go in with hope, but you also need to go in with a recognition of what can happen.
Yeah, and I don't know that anybody has that. They say, no, that's not true. That's not possible. And I worked with many different cases. I became an ADA advocate. And then I quit because I saw so many, different courts. It's all the same thing. The protective parent is, being manipulated. And, my last case was in Colorado. I was helping a woman. As an advocate, I'm supposed to sit beside her to monitor her state. And if she gets emotional, then I can speak for her. And usually in court, you have the defendant and the accuser are, separated. There she was there, and the father was right behind her with two of his attorneys. And then CPS was there with their attorney against the mother. It was horrible. It was like an inquisition court. And she spent 1 year in jail because I was new on the case. I didn't get through everything, but my understanding is she had tried to get a GoFundMe account and had told about the situation without giving name. There was no name. If you didn't know the situation, you would not have known. But apparently a judge had asked her to remove that from Facebook. And she was living up in the country where she didn't have internet, so she did not remove that right away. So she was in contempt of court, and that's why she ended up 1 year in jail. And the father was an abuser. She had found the journal of her daughter stating what he was doing, horrible things to these kids. But again, the father was a high power guy. And he had attorneys that he was paying. He had two attorneys, I think, paying $1,000 an hour, and she had no chance. She had problem with cancer and needed specific treatments. The judge says no, she doesn't have cancer.
Wait,
She was diagnosed with PTSD. The judge says no, she doesn't have PTSD. And she had panic attack during the trial. The judge told her, I give you 5 minutes to, get back to your senses. If you have a panic attack, you cannot force yourself to go
right?
back to being normal, but only accused of on every side. So, I went out with her and we did some of the techniques, and she went back in court, but she was battered for 9 hours, telling all kind of stuff. And the father took the children out of their environment. They were not allowed to go to I think they were in dance classes. He totally took them away from everything. And she had another panic attack that night, went to the hospital. The next morning, I went to the hospital, checked her out, went to court and said, she's in the hospital. She can't come to court right now. So the judge continued the trial without her and took her parental rights away. She's not allowed to see her children till they are 18.
Because she didn't show up to court, more or
Yeah,
less.
because she was in the hospital.
So now a judge has a medical degree and a psychology degree, and they can say that you don't have. This is pure insanity.
You know, as an ADA advocate, I'm supposed to be protected by the DOJ. The DOJ, they have rules. When the judge asked me to step in as an advocate, I had the two lawyers that interrogated me for 20 minutes. That's illegal. They're not allowed to do that. I went through that. Then I went to the ADA coordinator there, and she said, there is nothing I can do. So I went to the state ADA coordinator, and her answer was, well, that's a judge's court. She can do what she wants. Then I went to the DOJ and explained what had happened, and I never got an answer.
So there's nobody keeping the judges in line. They get to just...
No, that's, I think, one of the big problems. And when I was in California, I helped to legislate, get new laws passed, and we went to the Capitol in Sacramento and picketed and let legislature know, but the judge don't follow the rules. You know, I talked to some attorneys in San Francisco and Los Angeles to represent my case, and they say, we're not going in these little towns. The judge do whatever they want. But there it was, in Denver, Colorado, and that was the same thing. The judge does what she wants.
And then even if you ask for an appeal or for a different judge, isn't it that judge that gets to decide?
Yeah, that's the
if
judge
it gets moved to somebody else.
To decide if he or she wants to recuse herself. What is interesting, when I was in jail, one of the gal was getting newspaper, and she showed me the newspaper saying, isn't that your judge? He had been accused of domestic violence and was jailed. And he was a head judge on domestic violence. But then the victim recanted and said, no, he didn't hit me. I just rubbed my face against the carpet. Like, yeah. But later on, got him on real estate fraud, and he was put in prison. The same judge who took custody away from me when I was in Las Vegas did the same thing to my daughter, and she lost her children with the same judge.
What?
So that's why, I help people to survive and then recover. I don't go to court because, to me, what's the point? I can, tell people what they can or cannot do in court maybe, but that's a waste of my time and their money for me to stand in court when the court is, they do whatever they want. There is no law.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's talk about the good stuff that you do then. So how do you help? How do you help? I'm so frustrated with, and the part that's so frustrating is this is not an isolated story. This is not just your story, and it's not just your daughter's story or that other woman's story that you shared.
Been privy to hundreds of cases, and I know there are thousands. The number one thing is you need to get validation is so important. When I realized I was not the crazy one, that's a whole system that has a problem. And then you fight against the system. That's why I'm very hopeful with what Bandy Lee is doing, because she was able to have a huge conference in Washington, D.C. with, I think there were 4 state representatives there. So it's going to a higher level. Maybe something's going to happen before we're spinning our wheels, changing laws. And I stopped being in groups in Colorado because that's what they were trying to do, change the law, educate the judges. They don't need education. They know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And changing the law if they don't follow it. So I'd like to see judges accountable. And some judges actually end up, maybe in prison too for what they did.
Yeah. I mean, it's destroying lives.
Absolutely. According to Karen Huffer, who wrote the book Legal Abuse Syndrome, it's costing taxpayers in the billions a year for all the health problems that protective parents are having for the children later on, having all kind of substance abuse, and it repeats a cycle.
Mm-hmm. And then you can actually develop like physical ailments from the
Yeah,
psychological abuse.
yeah,
There's a lot of
absolutely.
autoimmune.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
autoimmune. And I was talking probably every month or so with a lady that was going through that. She couldn't see her child, her son, and she was so excited he was going to be 18. She was finally going to reconnect with him. And she had been in the hospital for heart problem. And the last time I spoke with her, she said, I went to his graduation and said, hey, congratulations. He looked at her and said, who are you? And I never heard
Oh,
from her again. So that's, I don't really like to be with some groups and stuff. I was told too, your children going to be so grateful. I mean, you even went to jail for them, and it's not the case. Many parents, when the children turn 18, they just run away from the whole situation and don't want to be part of anything, because many protective parents hope that when their children are 18, they will turn against the system. And my daughters were part of the, how they call them? I forgot. The courageous kids. And my one of my daughters even received a medal for her courage to speak out. She was in a conference in Southern California in San Diego and spoke up in a huge conference. And because of that, I still have her medal, but she threw it away. She said nothing changed. We got a medal. The DA, the Attorney General of California knows, and nothing changed.
mm.
But what I see happening now is much more people are talking about it. Vanderlee is a powerhouse, and she seems to have a lot of connection in legislatures around the country, and I think it's taking it to a different level. So
Yeah.
I am hopeful that things are going to change.
I think we all are. I mean, we have nothing else,
Yeah,
nothing else we can do, right? Than be hopeful that these people who are out on the battlefield fighting for these can actually make some changes.
I wrote a book called Yes, You Can Recover, what I used to help myself. And when I was out of prison, out of jail, my brain was not really functioning very well. I had definitely PTSD. Karen Hoffer helped me. But then I went to a dance class learning tango. Tango is a very difficult uh, dance to learn. And actually, it's a therapeutic dance, especially for Parkinson's and PTSD. And I
I did not
remember
know
when
that.
a step would get difficult, my teacher would look at me and say, hey, come back here. Because every time something was difficult, I was just dissociating. I wasn't there. And it kind of forced me to, by learning tango, to stay present. And nobody think about doing something like that, but it's pretty simple. Well, not simple, but it's one
Mm,
thing you can do.
that is interesting. I
And then you
never
need to
realized
keep
that.
up, eating healthy food. You don't,
Hmm.
because if you're under stress, you don't want junk food in your system. And then I learned emotional freedom technique. I had done imagery for years, so I was using that. And I remember when I was in jail there, I had been transferred to California, so going outside was going on the top of the jail, and I could walk 52 steps one way. I would walk 52 step one way, 52 step, and I was doing this tapping technique and tapping on my fingers and doing qigong, and the guards were looking at me, what is she doing? Well, trying to survive, but yeah. So that to keep getting your system back in balance, back in balance. But that's not like you can do it one time and you're fine. It's constant. And I used to panic every time I got something from the court, from my ex's attorney. I would panic for like 2 weeks, and then I would panic like 2 hours, and then I had my mind back and I could understand. And then I did also, there was what is it? An app called Lumosity.com, and it's doing math equation, following little thing that forces your mind to do something and not think about what's happening, and it helps to restore uh, to restore a little bit of balance. And something too, you need to teach your mind to follow what you want to focus on and not go into awfulizing or catastrophizing. And some very easy things to do is, when you go for a walk or even you in a car at a stop sign, for 30 seconds, you look at everything that's vertical. You force your mind to look at the vertical. And then you force your mind to look at horizontal.
Huh.
And you may not be able to do it for 30 seconds, but during that time, all the angst and everything is happening is not there. And you training your mind to the thoughts that you want to have. When I used to go to court, I would dissociate. So I wasn't there, but since I was my own attorney and not being there doesn't work in court. So I got the image that before going to court, I'm going to put on those lead shoes. It was just in my imagination. And the lead shoes helped me to stay present during the court. There's a lot of things like that. I probably know over 100 different techniques that can be used to, I wouldn't say you thriving during it, but at least you're not going off the deep end. You keeping yourself from having the symptoms get too physical, and eventually you can recover.
So is that something that you do with your clients now?
I like to learn a lot. I used to have a 10-week a program that I did with people going to court, and some don't need 10 weeks and some need over a year. So now it depends. What I like to do, if enough people are interested, is just do like we had that support group, because we're all going through the same thing. So why not work together? And just getting ready for court after court. What I noticed is with my clients, they could not make a separation between a fact and an emotion. I would ask, what happened, and they would get all emotional. And Dr. Karen Huffer came up with the debriefing circle, which I've been using a little differently. But you start by making a circle and give a title to what happened that day. I went to court on that day or something. Then you make another circle around it and you separate it and you write just the facts. And that is difficult for many people. The fact is, I had to be in court at such and such a time. That was a judge. These are the people that were present. There's no emotion there, just facts. And having to separate the facts from the emotions, and then we do another circle around it. And okay, there you can talk about the emotion. How do you feel about it? I was angry, I was frustrated, I was hopeless. And then another circle is, what have you lost? Well, I lost my home, I lost my credit card, I lost credibility, I lost my job. And then the last circle is just the one thing, is where is that trauma located in your body? And I use the EFTs, the tapping techniques, on everything, and it's really helpful.
I've learned a little bit about that. Can you just briefly go through what EFT is?
Briefly, emotional freedom.
Sorry.
The idea is what happens to you impacts the energy system that we have in our body. And you've heard about acupuncture. Instead of putting needles, we tap with our fingers. So, this awful thing happened, this awful thing happened, this awful thing happened, this awful thing happened, this awful thing happened. this awful thing happened. And there, either you say, this awful thing happened, or how did it make me feel? I was so angry. And then you go again, I was so angry. I was frustrated. And that kind of frees your energy system, your emotions on the moment, and it's less likely to impact your physical. That's, my belief on that. Because people that end up with immune problems or all kind of health thing, you can go layer by layer, layers, remove what happened, and they get better. So instead of, waiting until you're very sick, just, you know, put a stop to that. And
Okay.
again, it's, what's happening is not your fault. I was looking for 2 years. What did I do to get that on me? But, maybe you're a strong person and you're there to help others. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Don't go too much into the why did this happen to me, because it's not very helpful. It's
No.
more, okay, how can you use this to be strong, to make a difference, to help my children, to help others?
So if somebody wanted to use your services, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, you get on my website,
Mm-hmm.
and you can contact me. I'll talk with you for 20, 30 minutes. And I think the first time we talked for an hour. So, I put 20 minutes, and then sometime I extend it, and we just talk and see, how I can help you. And if you
Okay.
want to know more, go on my website, healthwisdomacademy.com, and you can put / PTSD-LAS if you want to learn more about legal abuse. And at the bottom of that page, that will lead you to another page where I made a lot of videos for an organization that doesn't exist any longer, but the idea about LAS still stays. So, that helps you what's going on in court, how you may prepare.
Yes.
So,
And I'm excited because you and I are also going to eventually do another podcast episode for the Legal Abuse Explained podcast, specifically on legal abuse syndrome. So that
yeah.
will be an exciting episode to learn more. You mentioned a lot of books that had helped you, and you have your book. Are there any other books that you would recommend for listeners who are going through varying degrees of the
Well,
legal
I
system,
think,
parental
this one,
alienation?
The Legal Abuse Syndrome by Karen Huffer, will help you. Uh, the books by, what was her name? Evans. What was her first name? All the books from Lundy Bancroft have been very helpful to me. And this one, Patricia Evans, that was verbal abuse. That's the one I read and said, this woman must have been in my living room, because it's just amazing. She knows what he said, what I said, and the whole dynamic. So for verbal abuse was an amazing book.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought all her books eventually.
Okay. So, in closing, I know you have so much to tell any victims or survivors or other listeners out there, but is there any takeaway or any lasting words of encouragement or wisdom you would like to leave?
The nightmare will have an end. Hang in there. Don't commit suicide, which somebody said is it's a final solution to a temporary problem. So, yeah, things will get brighter. And as more of us work together, and maybe with Bandili, I don't know, maybe we can change the system and protect our children.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me and for the chat.
Yes, I appreciate it. And I am looking forward to, because I think we have a lot more to talk about. I'm looking forward to more episodes on this podcast and
All
others.
right, sure. All right.
Okay.
Thank you again, Dr. Danielle, for joining me today, and thank you, warriors, for listening. I've included the links Danielle was referring to, as well as her 1 in 3 profile, in the show notes. I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, stay strong, and wherever you are in your journey, always remember, you are not alone.
Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1 in 3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1 in 3 Podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1 in 3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.